What lurks behind this unassuming storefronts in Cleveland, Ohio? It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. Learn the history of Wicca and the tale of those who brought it to the United States. See the tools of magic once used by practitioners of the arcane arts. It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Welcome back to the Buckland Museum Frankenstein radio controls, broadcasting out of an unknown cave in the wilds of Ohio. Today, our friend Sade Wolfkitten will lecture on the history of Solstice celebrations. But first, a little bit of business. The gift shop has been roaring the last few days. Everyone's just like, well, gee, I guess my mail's not going to show up on time. I probably should just head to the shop. So that's been a lot of fun. Great peeps have been rolling through. We now offer memberships here to the Buckland Museum. I love these. For $50, you get free admission to see the museum anytime you want. You get 10% off the gift shop, both online. We have a bunch of events starting next year. We're going to start off online, of course, but everybody take the vaccine, right? And we could get back started. Doing them live again, so you'll get 10% off of live events, and also you get to just walk around looking all cool, like, hey, look, I'm a card-carrying member of the Witch Museum, which is greatly appreciated. Free with your membership, you also get a zine. Here is issue 1 of the Circlet, which is our official propaganda outreach tool here for the Buckland Museum. It's a lot of fun. I kind of whipped this together in a few days. The next one I have 3 months on, and I've already got kind of planned out. It's going to be pretty cool. I think it's going to be the music issue, and a lot of our friends that are musicians are, putting some stuff in. So there's that. Other than that, we have regular hours, except closed on Christmas Day. So, just follow the website, come see us. But anyway, enough about that. Let's be here now and talk to Sadie. Hi, Sadie. Welcome.
Hey, how are you? Happy Solstice.
Yeah, happy Solstice. Tomorrow. It's such a wonderful time of year. It's my sister's birthday's yesterday. We have the solstice coming up. About a week and a half ago, we had Santa Lucia, which it seems like you might have some Santa Lucia action going up there. And then, of course, Christmas. So, when I was a kid, I could get my Star Wars toys. So, kind of in a lot of ways, the most wonderful time of the year. I prefer Beltane or Samhain, but still. It's, yeah. So you're going to teach us a bit about the traditions of Yule and going around
the various midwinter celebrations.
Awesome.
One of the first things definitely that we should clear up is that axial tilt is the reason for the season.
Yeah.
So
Saturn was, but yeah, I'm excited for the conjunction. It's going to be
great.
Great
conjunction is the end of the world.
Yeah.
Or the beginning.
I just think it'll be kind of cool. Doubt I'll be able to watch it though, right? Here in Cleveland, we have
I don't know.
Traditional winter gray skies going already. So,
and they're saying another storm is coming in midweek. I'm not quite sure when it's due to hit, but
really, yeah.
I know a lot of astrologers are very excited about Saturn going into Aquarius, though. It's been in Capricorn, its home sign, for 3 years now. And
it's time to move on.
Yeah, it definitely. Saturn in Capricorn is like the ultimate manifestation of the patriarchy too. So it's kind of interesting to
go.
see how some of that may be crumbling as
Yeah.
the planets are shifting.
See ya. So we have a message here from Joe Herrick. Hi, Steve and Sadie. Hi, Joe. Tawny Key
Hi,
says,
Joe.
hello, roses and fire. Hello, Tawny. It's nice to have everyone here. Remember when we used to be able to have these in real life? Well, maybe we could start doing that again soon. That's
looking forward to it.
Pretty much my wish.
I guess I should say that, if people have tuned into me before when I've done the meditations, I'm not doing something like that this time. I didn't have time to write a new one. Didn't want to just rehash the old. So I thought I would talk a little bit about the background of a lot of the customs that we observe at this time of year. And when I was saying about axial tilt, actually midwinter celebrations are something that human beings have been marking ever since they noticed that the days were getting shorter and the sun was standing still for a while. The earliest that I found reference to it was actually Egyptians celebrating it. They would bring in palm fronds, so bringing in greenery at the midwinter. It goes way, way back. It's something that has been done. The actual Christmas tree is a different thing. I've been reading this great book, and of course, it's over there in the other room. Jeff, no, I'd have to look up the title of it, but all about how Christmas was kind of created in America in the mid 1800s. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. But using greenery, bringing greenery in, certainly the holly and the ivy are things that date way back. There is the Saturnalia is really the the original precursor to the midwinter festival. The Saturnalia was reformed back in 217 BC, and to come a little more into alignment with how the Greeks were practicing things. But Saturnalia was a holiday. It was considered definitely the most beloved Roman holiday. It was one that just everybody looked forward to. And we are kind of in the middle of it right now because it would begin December 17th and last till the 23rd. And one of the interesting things about year-end holidays, there is quite a lot of overlap in practices that we might think of as being more tied to Halloween or Samhain or to New Year's and to Christmas or Solstice, that because they were all sort of, we're at the end point and we're going to start something new, they would have a lot of overlap in ways that people would celebrate this. One of the things that the Christmas feast, and I'm going to be using the term Christmas a lot because, it's Christmas customs, solstice customs, etc., and that's what people tend to think of. But the idea of having a feast, well, you've brought in the harvest, the fields are now possibly covered in snow, it's cold outside, and there are animals that may not make it through the winter. That cow's getting old, she's not producing milk anymore. We don't want to keep feeding her, let's eat her. And this would often be a time, maybe the only time in the year, that a lot of have it salted and put away, and salt pork, things like that. But to really get a nice fresh chop, this was the time of year that you'd be most likely to do that. And so bringing in a log that would burn for 12 days, the Yule log, bringing in a feast that everyone could partake in. And another thing that the Lord of Misrule, the idea of turning the tables, that the poor would go to the big manor house, the local rich people. That's who would put on the feast. And they would basically lay out a spread in an exchange of goodwill. And it wasn't just like, hey, you guys aren't so bad. It was basically, hey, how about we throw this big party for you so you don't rise up in revolt and murder us in our beds for another year? Does that sound good to you? Here, eat and drink of the best of what we have to offer. And this was a custom actually that continued in the Americas into slaveholding times. And it was something that slave owners would do. They would throw a big party and get the slaves drunk, and then the next day go, see, you guys, you can't hold your liquor, can't you? Better let us look out for you for another year, because, there you go. There was a very paternalistic approach to it. But for many years, though, this was a regular practice that, people would feast, they would drink, they would party. And what else are you going to do in these long, cold nights? It's the darkest time of the year. The day is as short as it's going to get. To me, it's a little, I don't know. I don't know so much on how people calculated times, but when you get to, okay, today will be 0.3 seconds longer than it was yesterday, how do you really know? I mean, a week from now, maybe you'll notice that the sun is rising or setting in a different place, but anyway, it was still something that people were aware of and made merry at this season. Again, as I say, it was often considered the end of the year. And one of the interesting customs that I would love to find out more about is the whole idea of mumming, of people going around from door to door, and also wassailing. And I may talk about that a little bit here too. But that, and in the song "Here We Come a Wassailing," there's a line, "We are not sturdy beggars who beg from door to door, but we are neighbors' children whom you have seen before." This is kind of the idea of like, yeah, we're showing up and demanding that you give us food and drink, but don't worry, we're not brigands off the highway. But there are also, with the mumming, people will dress up in these crazy costumes, and a lot of times they're made of straw. Some of these European straw men have, you can look up these pictures online, and if I had it more together, I would be screen sharing some stuff here, but I didn't, and I'm not. But you can see these huge, scary looking creatures that would come around, and if you have been to, if you've ever seen the Cleveland Krampus, I know, I'm sure they didn't do much this year, but they would often go to the Braumeister on St. Nicholas Eve, and there's a couple guys who have these traditional, they've carved their Krampus masks, and they've got the deer skins and the bells and the horns on a stick. And then Karentovania in February in the northern Slavic village over there on St. Clair, they do the same kind of thing. And the currents are similar, these straw creatures that come about at the end of the year. And maybe they're the monsters that you need to chase away. Krampus has his own history of being sort of an anti-Saint Nicholas. But the mummers will also come and perform a little playlet. Once you let them in, you get this troop of folks come in, and here come I, whoever it is. A lot of them now are based on things like St. George and the Dragon, that they reenact this slaying. But and unfortunately, a number of the notes that I've had on this I don't have access to right now, but when I was really into this a few years back, was tracing it back that some of these stories can be related all the way back to actually ancient not even Hindu, but Aryan practices of these cart festivals. And certain of these roles continue down over the centuries of there is a doctor who heals things. There is some sort of hag character in Old Bessie, which is almost always a man dressed as a woman and the more horrific as possible. There may be animal characters, and then there are certain other ones that are kind of traditional that show up in these plays over and over. The what is the is it a white mare? There, and it's a Welsh term, so I wouldn't even try and say it. But it's basically a horse skull on a stick, and somebody's carrying this around, and he's. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about? Not hearing you right now, Stephen. I think you're muted.
We actually have one in our window.
Okay.
That yeah, the fine people at Cleveland Curiosities hooked me up with a skull last year of a horse. And, we have it covered with a cloak and some ribbons and some bells to it. And yeah, it hangs out in our window. It just kind of looks cool there. I never took it down from last year. It just kind of becomes part of the whole thing because, I don't know. A horse skull in our window just looks badass all year round. But yeah, the Mari Lud.
That's the name.
Actually, yeah. So actually, I'll be right back with a picture of it. Please keep going.
And having an animal character, and as I say, a doctor, sometimes a soldier one. There's always someone who gets slain and resurrected. Now, there's a theme you might be a little familiar with at this time of year, are generally part of these plays. And the mummers now perform in the streets generally. Oh, there it is. Yeah, check that out. Oh, I didn't even see that when I was there. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's just in our front window when you walk in. But this is an illustration by our dear friend Johnny Decker Miller, who he's an illustrator out of Chicago. So, yeah, the Mari Lud.
Very nice. So the mumming and wassailing are tied to this idea of people going from door to door, and our toasted is white and our ale is brown. Give us some good stuff. We won't mess with you. It can be festive. It can also be a pretty implicit threat. And some of the later development of Christmas customs in the United States evolved to deal with this, because you would have these bands of basically what we would call gangs, young men going about getting wasted in the streets and banging pots and pans and shooting off fireworks and maybe guns and, whooping it up and demanding, give us another round, give us something to eat, we'll leave you alone. Very similar to trick-or-treating in its way, but on a more serious level. And this book that I was talking about traces a lot of that to how the older custom, when the doors would be thrown open and you would bring the community together for this feast, had kind of fallen away, and particularly fell away under the Puritans and Oliver Cromwell. They had outlawed all that, the old pagan revelry. And Christmas was actually illegal in America for a number of years because of that, because the Puritans that came over were following those kind of rules. I know, as I say, I am kind of rambling here. I've got multiple notes, but didn't get them entirely organized. I was talking about Saturnalia, and a lot of the practices do go back. Okay, Stephen's interrupting me again here.
I'd like you to back up just a little bit there to the thing about the Christians having their war on Christmas there, right?
Absolutely.
you look at Tucker Carlson, right? And he's just such a victim
I'd
with the
rather not.
Christmas, right? And this is a Christian thing. So anyway.
Yeah,
Apologize.
it was okay. Cromwell canceled it from 1644 to 1656, and then it was outlawed in Boston in 1659 until 1681. And there were other parts of the colonies where, in Jamestown, New York, for instance, they still were celebrating the old way, which included a lot of imbibing. But the Puritans were not into that. And there are stories on record where you would get some young men coming and pounding on the door and saying, "Hey, we know you've got some cider in there. Give it over." And these horrified Puritans being, "Well, I never." Oh, yes, exactly. You know. But as I said, I want to go back some to the Saturnalia because a lot of our customs do seem to trace back to that. The idea of giving gifts to each other, of having these feasts, of greenery being brought up, the lights, lighting candles. And in fact, candles and honey cakes were very traditional gifts. And one of the interesting things that I found was that there's Saturnalia, but that wasn't the only festival that was going on then. There was also I want to say the Strigillaria. Let me see if I can scroll down here and find it. But that one was dedicated to a goddess. I want to say his name's Strenia. Yes, that's her. So greenery from the groves was a traditional gift in her honor, the sweet cakes, honey, and there are some who think that she later evolved into a character named Befana. And you can't see it in the framing there, but I have a bunch of my little international Santa characters out. So let me where's the camera? There it is. There's Befana. She is in Italy a character who will come around, and she has, of course, a Christianized story about, oh, she missed the three kings and now she's chasing around trying to catch up to them or something. But there are those who think that that character actually evolved from this earlier Roman goddess. Another one of my little guys that I have here is for some reason the picture on my phone is backwards, so it's always going the opposite of how I want to look at it. This is Yule Tomtar. He may be Swedish. He's definitely associated with Yule, and he's a little elf or gnome that comes around. And I thought it was interesting that he's got a cat with him. I keep bringing this the wrong way. Where's Kitty? There's the kitty. I was just watching an episode last night about a Yule cat that is a monster that will come around and look for people who don't have new clothes and eat them. If you didn't get new clothes for Christmas, the Yule cat will kill you. I kind of dozed off while I was watching it, so I'm not sure that I got the entire rationale behind that, but we have several holidays that kind of have come together. We have the Saturnalia, we have Yule, which was definitely more Norse. I am not as sure with the Celtic what a specific Celtic festival would be. I think that they were a little more with the cross quarter days. So Samhain would be a big one. The next one would be Brige at the beginning of February, whereas the equinoxes and solstices, I don't know if those were as important. And I will say right now, I'm not a big Celtic scholar. There are people out there who would absolutely love to correct me on all this, I'm sure, and know it much better than I do. But there is the later tradition of the Oak and Holly King that seem to relate to some of the Celtic ideas. It's definitely a Wiccan tradition where these the Holly King and Oak King are brothers, but they're also sort of two faces of the god, that they battle each at midwinter and midsummer. And in midwinter, the Oak King defeats the Holly King, and he'll rule until midsummer, and then they'll battle again, and it'll switch around, and Holly will rule from midsummer to midwinter. And whoever wins out becomes the partner of the goddess for that time period. Holly is one of those plants that is considered to be evergreen, in that you walk outside, could go over the next street over from me, there's a holly bush on the tree lawn. You know, the leaves will still be bright and green even in the snow. The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the woods, the holly bears the crown. That's a carol that, again, now has been Christianized, but is believed to have roots that go further back, reflecting the rising of the sun and the running of the deer, the playing of the merry organ, sweet singing in the choir. How the lyrics go. Caroling, too, is a tradition that goes way back. You get together, you're sitting in the great hall, it's cold outside, it's dark. What are you going to do? Let's sing. And while most of the carols that we know today definitely have a Christian background, there are some like that, the Holly and the Ivy, or In the Bleak Midwinter, that may trace further back. And of course, caroling also ties into the wassailing, the people going around again from door to door. They're singing as they go. Here we come a wassailing among the leaves so green. And wassailing is a tradition that I would love to revive. If anybody knows of an orchard in the area, one of these years I really want to get some folks together and go out and do this. It is that people will get together, they'll go out, drinking cider, but they take cider and toast or bread to the orchard. They hang the bread in the branches of the tree. Apple tree, we wassail thee. Here's hoping you should bear. And then there's hatfuls, catfuls, 3 bushel bagfuls, little heaps under the stairs. And sometimes they'll shoot guns through the tree branches. Sometimes it's just hip, hip, hooray. They cheer for it. There's a lot of great videos on YouTube, because this is a tradition that has continued in Britain, at least, of people that will go out, and it's sort of a community party. You know, there'll be a little bonfire afterwards, and everybody stands around, and maybe they're drinking cocoa these days, but they might be drinking a little stronger beverage. And wassail is basically a mulled wine. I think you could probably also make it as a mulled cider. Heat it up, add oranges if you have them, nutmeg and ginger, cinnamon and cloves. That's the cause of his shiny red nose. And again, this is something that can be offered to the mummers. They may come to your door while they're wassailing. They may also come to your door. Another group that can come around are the Wren Boys. And this is a tradition that I just find fascinating. The idea of hunting the wren. In the Middle Ages, they would literally go out and hunt a wren, capture it, kill it, hang the bird up on a staff, and then carry this around through the town. Jenny Wren would be killed perhaps for the crime of beating its wings against a drum and alerting soldiers to their alerting the enemy to the position of the soldiers. Later, it may, again, a lot of these traditions got Christianized because people held on to them. This is what we have always done. You know, we gather together at the dark time of year. We eat, we drink, we sing, we give each other gifts. And well, as I say, I've got a bunch of notes in front of me. I didn't get this written out as a full speech, and I can research this forever. I love this stuff. Now, where did my brain just go? We were hunting the wren, and dancing is part of this too. A circle dance would be part of it in the churchyard after the wren has been buried. And again, some of these may be performed by men only, or some of them may be men, and some of them may be the men dressed as the women. Sometimes there is just one extra woman who is definitely a man dressed in woman's clothing, who is the widow of the wren, and she is again similar to these the hag characters, the Bessie, and so on. Oh man, I know I had another thought cross my mind there. I'm looking at my notes in the background here. On New Year's Day, men cover themselves with goat skins to impersonate the Kukeri, who both embody and chase away evil spirits. In the past, they'd brush against women to bestow fertility. That is a tradition which, if you're familiar, and Stephen, you probably know of Boujalud, the pipes of Pan, pipers of Jujuka, that they actually sew someone into a goat skin, and he kind of runs through the streets whipping the women with fresh goat hide for fertility. And that is a practice that seems a lot more universal than you might think, actually. Are you muted again?
Yeah, my friend Nathan
you're muted
was actually at the Jujuka thing, and he was like, it was weird.
Can't
I
hear
was
you,
sitting
bud.
there, and all of a sudden this guy dressed like a goat walked in. So
turn your mic on, Stephen.
Oh, am I here now? No. All right. Well,
all right.
Peace out.
Okay. Now, what I was just talking about there with Boujalud, I'm not sure if there is a particular time of year that they do that one, but these fertility traditions, a lot of this is tied into this. The idea of wassailing the apples. Well, we want the apple trees to be fertile and to bear again. And after we've had a few glasses of wassail, if we go home with our preferred partner, maybe we might be a little fertile too. You don't know. We'll have a lot of Virgos next year. Okay, now here I am yapping away, and we have never talked about Santa Claus at all. There are those who definitely see in the Santa character traces of Odin. There are those who refer to the Sami, the Laplanders, who their shamans would dress in furs because the snow would be so high. They would have to come in through the smoke hole, basically coming down the chimney. And the Sami also will consume the fly agaric mushroom, the red and white mushrooms, and use that to access the spirit world and bring wisdom back to the village. And the reindeer also really like those mushrooms, and apparently the reindeer get pretty messed up on them. So is that how the reindeer learn how to fly? We don't know. But Santa Claus, as we know him, is an invention. Of course, he's based or said to be based on Saint Nicholas, who was, I want to say, 6th century saint, Saint Nicholas of Myra. So Saint Nicholas Day is December 6th, and some people will practice gift giving then, put the shoes out, and the saint will leave something for children. One of the things that he was revered for, he was someone who would travel around doing good. He would give to people who were in need. And he, I believe, is to have rescued children from, now am I mixing up my Bible stories, because those weren't the kids that were in the furnace. St. Nicholas didn't get them. But because he had this tradition of gift giving, of helping the poor, and particularly of helping children, he came to be seen as this benevolent figure who in the Netherlands became known as A shortened version of his name became Sinterklaas, Sinterklaas, the Klaas being short of Nicholas. And Sinterklaas then continues a lot of these same traditions. He has a big red cape. He happens to ride a white horse, but he comes to visit children on his name day and brings them gifts and has a book in which he records if they've been naughty or nice. And I have a Sinterklaas here too. Where's our little guy? There he is. You can see the saint. He's got some gifts in his hands. He's got his red cloak, and he's ready to go. I wish I had some Krampuses in this collection. I don't think when these Santas were being made, Krampus was quite the thing in America that he's come to be now. Sometimes Sinterklaas has an associated character who is sometimes known as Black Peter or Schwarz Pete, or the Belsnickel. These have become somewhat questionable because they do consider blacking the face completely, and this character is the counterpart to Saint Nicholas, that he would come around and have whisks for the bad children or coal for their stockings, things like that. Whether or not it has any racist roots in its origin is something that is under debate. People will take blackened cork to disguise themselves, which is, a method of disguise that is easily acceptable to people, or coal dust or whatever. Were they doing it because they were referring to people whose skins are naturally dark? I don't know. I'm not at all going to wade in on that one, but in the modern era, the characters are becoming to be seen much more problematic. And so even though for years and now, if you see more modern or if say modern, like 20th century Dutch representations, a lot of them are things that would be similar to the kind of mammy characters that we would think of from being the 1920s or earlier, and they continued well into the later part of the 20th century. And even if they didn't start out as having any racial basis, they seem to have acquired it along the way. The Belsnickels are a character that did emigrate to America, some maybe independently even of Sinterklaas. These seem to have come over with the Pennsylvania Dutch and the Germans, and again would go from door to door looking for bad children, bringing punishments as needed, or serving as a cautionary tale. You better behave yourself or the Belsnickel will get you. And he is also very similar to Krampus and has a similar approach, a similar appearance, the word I'm trying to say here. I'm seeing in my notes the reference to an animated short film, Santa is a Psychedelic Mushroom. I believe this is on YouTube, and it talks a little bit more about the Sami origins, the shaman, the red and white suit, and the mushrooms. And if it's the one that I'm thinking of, it's I think about 15-20 minutes long, and it's definitely it's well made and worth your while to watch it. So we were talking about Germans. We're talking about them bringing in the Christmas tree. There is a lot of people think, oh, well, the first Christmas tree was Victoria and Prince Albert. He was making a callback to his German roots in, I think that was like the 1840s. Let's see if I can find a timeline over here. It does seem that it may have been a little bit earlier than that, but not a whole lot. Like in the 1820s, Christmas really seemed to shift quite a bit in its character, particularly here in America, where it had been for centuries a holiday where, as I said, the rich would open their doors to the poor. Everyone would come together. It was a community event. You would feast, you would drink, you would make merry. And then it started becoming to where the poor became these roving gangs of young men who were demanding rather than simply accepting. Um, and as they would demand food and drink, the rich became less willing to provide it to them. And so there was this an outcry, a public outcry of what do we do about the problems of Christmas? And there was a definite shift from it being a community centered celebration to a family centered celebration. And this happened in the early 1800s. Um, so there were actually Christmas riots in 1828 that actually led to the creation of the first police force in New York City, because this got so out of hand and these gangs were showing up and breaking people's windows, and it was the socialist revolution, man. Um, so a lot of the stories that we now know of, certainly A Visit from St. Nicholas or The Night Before Christmas, and the illustrations were actually part of a sort of concerted effort to make this holiday, to change the character of Christmas, basically, instead of being an end of year, blow it out party, but good times kind of party. Let's get together and we'll just, stuff our faces and get wasted and sleep it off until the sun starts coming back again. Um, to being a more a proper family sort of celebration. And one of the things I haven't touched on at all here is the idea of this being Jesus's birthday. Um, Nobody knows when Jesus was born, assuming you accept that Jesus was born at all. But if he was, shepherds are unlikely to be watching their flocks by night in the dead midwinter. It may have been in spring. It could have been in autumn. Um, Most people, though, seem to agree that if he was born, December 25th was not the day that it happened. But December 25th was very close to the solstice. And again, before the calendar was reformed, I believe it was Julian that reformed the calendar, added a couple extra months in there. That would have been closer to being the actual day of the solstice. And of course, it was also the birthday of Mithras, the unconquered sun. So when it Christians started looking to kind of say, hey, we want in on some of this action, um, it was Julius the First who declared December 25th as the official birthday of Jesus. But that didn't happen until 350 AD, or CE, if you like Common Era. Prior to that, nobody really talked about it. It wasn't a holiday that was celebrated particularly. Easter was much more important to Christians, the day that Christ rose from the dead and came back, and which I think is another thing where that led to the December 25th. If you figure that there are myths saying that Christ was, wait, am I getting confused? Crucified on his birthday, which would have led to him being conceived in December. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot of weird biblical calculation you can get into if you're interested in such things. But having decided that, okay, we know you're all getting together, we're doing this thing in mid-December, how about we just change the name? Instead of doing it in honor of Saturn, let's do it in honor of Jesus. And the peasants were kind of like, Can we still eat and drink? Okay, we're in. We don't care. And then of course over the centuries that started getting a little more shaped, and practices became less acceptable, drawing carts around the fields and so on. But the December 25th date really has nothing to do with Christianity. It is absolutely arbitrary. And so again, when, the people who want to talk about, remember the reason for the season, well, the reason is that some emperor decided he was going to bogart the long-standing seasonal celebrations that people have been doing from time immemorial. And so now here we go. All right, what have we covered? Have we covered all kinds of things? Is there anything well, I was talking about the Christmas tree a little bit, how that came in. That was in the 1800s. And an interesting thing about it is that Unitarians apparently had quite a bit to do with introducing this, that there is, oh, I don't remember her first name off the top of my head, but someone Sedgwick, who is actually related to Edie Sedgwick, who anybody who is a big fan of the Warhol factory scene knows who Edie was. But her family had been in Massachusetts for many, many, many years. And it was a great, great aunt of hers. Was it Catherine? No, it wasn't Catherine. Maybe an Elizabeth, who was a writer, and stories that she told and that people associated to her told kind of introduced this concept of, let's do this thing for the children, and perhaps first it was just a bough. They would just have a big pine branch and they'd hang some presents on that. Then later they started bringing the tree in and lighting candles on it. And it was interesting to me that this was often actually done on New Year's Day. And again, there was a custom of going about from door to door. You would go visit your friends on New Year's. If you were a man, of course, the women didn't do this, but the men would travel about and stop at each house and have a cup of good cheer. And the women who started looking for, well, we would like this to be a more sedate holiday. All this drinking in the streets is getting a little out of hand. And, having it family centered, they started having this idea of, well, if you have this lovely background, you see behind us here in the parlor, we have the tree set up and the children have just come in and are receiving their gifts. And would you like a cup of coffee while you watch all this celebration? So, and it's also interesting that the idea of the gifts evolving very quickly from homemade to something produced and purchasable goes back to the early 1800s, and even complaints about then Christmas getting too commercialized go right back along with it. So when you were talking before about old Tucker Swanson McNear Carlson complaining about the war on Christmas, there have been various wars on Christmas going on for a good 200 years, if not more. So the tree itself did seem to have originated mostly in Germany and came over with, there are people who introduced it, but it really kind of got popularized with Victoria and Albert, who they included a tree in 1841. I was going to say 1843. 1843, I see, is when Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, and wrote it for money because he was strapped for cash and said, all right, let me knock something out real quick here. And wrote that in 6 weeks. Christmas itself was not declared a holiday in the United States until 1870. So, the idea that this is some ancient revered holiday is a created myth in a lot of ways. This story, and it serves various purposes. The idea that the peasants should be grateful for what they get, that this should be a family-oriented holiday instead of people going out in the streets and marching around and drinking and banging drums, is a very calculated move at calming things down, taming them down. I said up at the beginning how a lot of practices that we might consider more for New Year's Eve or for Halloween are also associated or have been associated with Christmas. And the idea of marching through the streets, gathering together, the banging pots and pans and drums. If you think about when the ball drops at midnight on New Year's Eve, if you ever are standing outside and you don't need to have a watch. You can hear it in the air, because everybody's like, woo, yeah. That sort of emotion is something that people express, and we like to do it together. We like to gather in groups. We like to survive this winter together because this year in particular, we really do need to do that. But the idea that we all needed each other, that we needed to band together to get through, to make sure that everyone was fed, that we stayed warm, that we survived until the spring came again, is an impulse that goes back to the earliest days of human consciousness. And the ways that we have celebrated this together go back nearly as far. The idea that you would want to bring a reminder of summer in, bring in something that's green, bring in a tree or fronds or holly, to bring lights through the darkest night. Whether you're lighting candles, giving candles as gifts, wearing candles on your head. This is just one of these sort of natural impulses that still continues, and they all predate the idea of this being a specifically Christian holiday. So when you hear, people grumbling about like, well, all this, lighting the lights and dressing up the yard and not very, just shut up. I mean, your inflatable Jesus and Mary nativity scene is not all that traditional either. So, it's something though that I really like to do, deck the halls with greenery as much as possible. And you can see a little bit of my background here. That's the part I'm willing to show on camera. Behind this camera is Santa's workshop, and it's quite a mess right now. So before we get started, Stephen, you and I were talking a little bit about, did you have any questions, anything you wanted to bring up? I know you said, are there any pagan traditions or things that I do at Solstice that I would associate with paganism? One of the things that I used to do when my kids were smaller, and let's see here, can we get a look at, you can kind of see where all the Santas are set up there at the base of the fake fire, which is really ironic because that TV is sitting on top of a fake fireplace. It could also be a fake fire. I started collecting these little Santas, and there's only two that are female. Here's the other one. I didn't bring her out yet. Babushka. I don't know much about her other than she's Russian. But I would put out a bowl, and it's funny, it's actually a collection plate that I scored somewhere along the way over the years. But I would have that in the center of the coffee table, and I would set these figures around it. And then we would sort of do an Advent thing, as we were approaching solstice, that maybe we would add more figures, or you would bring out, I know some years I did it with where I had rocks and I had your crystals, and greenery, and then some of the little creatures. like when if you are putting up a nativity set, how you have the donkey and the different things, and I have a little goat who I got. He's my nice nativity goat. There are Yule goats too. This is another. I believe that one is also Swedish, where they make this enormous straw goat at Yuletide, and the association of horned creatures with this celebration. We all think of reindeer, but the goats are up there too. But I would do this with my kids, that we would, kind of as we were approaching solstice. I We maybe tried 1 year, maybe two, to actually hold like our celebration on the solstice as opposed to on Christmas. But just because of secular calendars, and particularly once they were in school and so on, it just, it was a nice thought, but it wasn't so easy to do. Um, I may or may not be joining together with some of the Starwood people. I know they're doing a little private online Yule extravaganza. I have to see how my schedule goes. And right now, I don't know. We're kind of up in the air as to what we're doing, since we don't have the family can't really gather, other than the family that's already here. My brother's out west, and my other child is down in Columbus, and they're saying there's supposed to be a big storm coming in this week, so even traveling in the city might be a little tricky. um I don't know. Are you out there? Do you have anything else you'd like to ask or throw in on this?
Can you hear me
Are
now,
you
Sadie?
unmuted?
Am I unmuted? Can you hear
No,
me?
you're still muted, Stephen.
Hold on a second here.
Oh, it's back to just me.
What about
maybe.
now?
Okay, now we can hear you. That's good.
Okay. So, yeah, sorry about that. Little technical difficulties. Yeah, no, I was just looking at the weather in Cleveland here. So it looks like the storm's going to be on Thursday. What day is Christmas?
Friday.
Is that Friday? So
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be gross. And then Friday, yeah, whatever. We're in Cleveland. We got to be tough.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
I hear you talk about some of the Swedish traditions there. My mother being Swedish, that's usually kind of the kind of things that we do. Always a lot of straw goats laying around her house, but
Yeah.
I won't see her this year. Hopefully, they'll be able to travel from Sweden next year. So.
Oh, is she in Sweden?
Yeah, last year my mom and dad were like, you know what? Let's move to Sweden. So, yeah,
kind of cool.
Yeah,
it's tough right now, but
Yeah, I don't know if they had, if there was a pandemic, if they would have, if they could have seen what was coming, if they would have made that choice. But you make the decisions, and then let the chips fall as they may, right? So.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
I will often say that my ethnic background is I'm half Appalachian and half New Englander, because I really was not raised with much of an ethnic tradition of any sort. A little bit of Scots, come on, you coming up? All right. But other than, my grandfather was very proud of being Scottish and very clear that we were MacDonald's, not McDonald's.
Right.
None of those lowlanders for us.
Yeah.
But, our traditions were just American traditions, we didn't have any in particular. We had our favorite Christmas albums. I just turned somebody on at work to the Kingston Trios last month of the year, which I have been rocking a lot this December. One, because I listened to it and it's just like, oh, that takes me back. But I enjoy listening to it, and it's actually, that's where I first heard of wassailing. They have Why can't we have Christmas?
Wassailing from the Akron, the Rubber City Noise kids down in Akron would have a wassail party, like, at the end of the year. And I was like, what is this? Oh, boy, I drank it one time.
I should ask Jimmy Image. I wonder if he's got any apple trees down where he is. He's got that community garden next to his house that he runs.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned tomte, which are, the Swedish Christmas elf.
Yeah.
And tomte usually goes to see my niece and nephew every year. I wonder if he's going to have to wear a mask this year.
So do they have somebody actually dress as him to go make the visit? Or
honestly, I don't know if my niece or nephew are watching right now, but if they are, they're probably old enough to realize that it's, a family friend that puts on a costume, shows up and gives a gift, and then goes back to the woods. I mean, they're of an age where they would know. They would recognize.
Yeah, we never, no one ever dressed as Santa to hand out gifts or anything. I mean, we had the story that Santa brought the gifts, but other than that.
Yeah.
Now, coming up to Cleveland at Christmas time, you mentioned, was it, you know what? I met your sister last year, didn't I? I did, at a Christmas party, I think.
Yeah, you probably did.
Yeah. And I'm just realizing that my brother's birthday was Friday. And so a lot of times this weekend, because I grew up down in Kent, so we would come up to Cleveland and stay a night or two in a hotel and look at all the windows and visit Santa and Mr. Jingling and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
So I have very strong memories of the season and of the sort of the magic of it, that it would get dark so early. And yet, even though it was dark, there were these sparkling lights everywhere. And, the store windows would be done up with these often, not just displays, but they would have these little moving, here's the elf hanging the ornament on the tree over and over. And
like the beginning of A Christmas Story.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. One of my proudest moments, other folks may not as much, that I sometimes will perform as a living statue or character performer. And a few years back, I had been hired by, I don't even remember for sure the name of the group, but a Cleveland booster ship kind of group to perform. And they had told me that I could set up in Tower City in the lobby. So I did. Next thing I know, I've got like cops around me, and basically I was the sturdy beggar. They were like ready to haul me off because I had a tip bucket out in front of me standing on my milk crate.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm like, I have permission to be here. And they're like, the hell you do, So instead, I wound up and this is before the casino was there, this organization, their offices were right there on the corner of Public Square in what was the old Higbee's building and the window that's in A Christmas Story. And so I get to go stand in that window and perform. And for me, that was just like, I've achieved the Christmas apotheosis. I'm now part of the scene.
That's awesome. I love that. So the other day I was talking to Jason Mankey, a writer.
Yeah, I saw some of that.
And of course I had to bring up about how I used to have a gig where I would sell totemic symbols of the winter solstice, or, as we call them here in Cleveland, leg lamps. So.
Yeah, can I do this without knocking things over? No, it's not right where I can grab it. I have a little a nightlight that's one of those. Although
I find that nightlight. So.
Yeah, it's down to I just have a shade now. It snaps onto the light, but
oh, okay, those are cool too.
Yeah.
All right, well, Sadie, it's always so much fun to talk to you. I guess next up, Candlemas, right?
Yeah. Which is shortly after that is Winter Star. The Winter Star Ball is happening, and it will be virtual this year.
Okay.
But I know I'm doing a meditation.
Oh, sweet! Awesome.
And if again, if I was on my laptop, I could probably screen share an image or something with you. But there is flyers up for that. So
yeah. So
right.
whoever brings some by here, and I'll make sure.
How'd you get quiet again?
I'm quiet again.
So.
And
yeah. We're still on here, so just be quiet and come around. I have people arriving here in the background.
Oh, cool. I had a lady that wanted to buy some incense while you were speaking, and I was just
I don't know what you did to restart yourself, but you may need to do it. I'm not hearing you again.
Hello.
There you are. Okay.
That's weird. Yeah, so I had a lady while you were talking that came, and she was like knocking, and I'm like, what are you doing? And she wanted to buy some incense. I don't really sell incense. It gives me a headache, but I sold her some sage. And I was like, all right, well, cool. So, Sadie, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. If you can get your Starwood people, tell them to bring me some flyers. I would love to put this in people's faces.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if there are any printed yet, but as soon as we get some, we'll definitely bring them over.
All right, that sounds good. And I'll see you in 6 weeks for between now and the equinox.
Yeah. We'll see you next year.
Yeah. Just goodbye 2020. I am so stoked to have this year just thrown out the window. Oh, and Joe said that would be awesome with sail party with Jimmy. So
I agree. So we'll have to pursue that. See if that's something we can make happen. But I'd like to do one up here too. You know, there's a little orchard over west of me on Detroit that is actually, is it going to stay an orchard? Is it going to become a development kind of over by where Cocktails is, if anybody knows the area? I'm like, well, I know there's an orchard over there. I don't know if they'd enjoy us showing up to sing to it. So, you know, if anybody has a couple of apple trees on their property, keep us in mind.
All right. So you heard it here. And thanks for everyone that's ordered the Buckland Museum Circlet, our zine. I love this so much. I spent a few days working on it, but I'm pretty proud of it. If you want to come see us here before the end of the year, buy your tickets online. There's now an opportunity that you can get your tickets for, give tickets as a gift certificate. And to everyone else out there just chilling right now, I just want to remind you one thing, and that is to stay witchy, my friends. All right. Happy Yule, Solstice, etc., that other thing. And take care. Stay witchy.